Welcome back to Cletha Vessel, where we explore law, history, and current affairs. Today we are diving further into constitutional interpretation, covering some important doctrine and principle. I'm your host Cletha, and let's jump right in. So let's begin with the principle of harmonious construction. This is essentially about resolving conflict between different provisions of Constitution. The idea is that when two provisions seem to clash, they should be interpreted in a way that gives effect to both. We avoid making any part of Constitution redundant unless absolutely unnecessary. Moving on, we have purpose interpretation. Think of it as a big picture view. The Constitution is seen as a political product rather than just a collection of statutes. Court looks at why a constitutional provision was introduced and what issues it aims to address. This approach is closely related to mischief rule, which dates back to English law. According to this rule, courts should seek out the mischief or issue a law intended to remedy and interpret constitutional accordingly. Although statements of objects and regions are not usually relied on to interpretation laws, they can be useful in understanding the urgency or conditions that lead to creations of a law. It has to set a scene even though it is not a definitive tool for interpretation. Similarly, legislative proceedings include debates from Constituent Assembly, can shed light on intentions behind constitutional provisions. While not definitive, these discussions gives us a glimpse into the thought process of lawmakers, often additional context. Marginal rule can help guide interpretation, particularly when a provision meaning is ambiguous. However, rule doesn't have the power to override actual text of Constitution. Next up is the concept of proviso. A proviso is like an exception to a rule. With a statute, it does widen the scope of a provision but rather limit in a certain ways. The Latin term translates expression of one thing is exclusion of another thing. When Constitution explicitly mentions one term, that is expressio union exclusio alteris, it implies the exclusion of others. So if a particular subject is covered in detail, it generally means that others were intentionally left out. Now, to the doctrine of severability. This is a crucial one if a part of a law is deemed unconstitutional. Only that specific part is struck down, allowing the rest of the law to remain intact, provided the remaining part can stand alone without it. The key question is whether law can still serve its purpose after removing invalid part. Finally, Doctrine of Prospective Overruling allows Supreme Court to apply new legal rule only to future cases. This means that when necessary, the court can set aside precedent but limited impact to case going forward. This is particularly relevant in constitutional matters where Supreme Court recognizes the need for change while protecting past action based on old rule. And that wraps up today's deep dive into the principle and doctrines. Understanding this concept helps us to appreciate the flexibility and adaptability of Constitution. If you found this episode enlightening, be sure to subscribe to Cletha Vessel for more exploration into law and beyond. Stay curious, and until next time, this is Cletha signing off. Thank you.